Hey y'all, I'm Maggie, and you're watching another episode of Suncrest On Demand. Before we go any further, I'm sure someone is watching their first Suncrest On Demand video. I'm super excited that you're here. Help me help you. Text the word Suncrest to 94,000. When you do that, we'll send you a digital gift card directly to your phone for some coffee, simply for getting this far in the video. Now, here's a tip for everyone watching. Make sure you have the Suncrest app. When you use our app, you get insider access to things like past content, upcoming events, stuff to help you, your kids, and your students engage with their faith journey, and much, much more. Actually, if you're looking to take a next step in your own faith journey right now, our app is the best tool to use. You can find the Next Steps button right on the homepage. Take a look right now to sign up for baptism, join a group to find your people here at Suncrest, or join a serving team and make a difference. In our app and on our website, you can also partner with us financially. Your generosity makes a huge difference in Northwest Indiana and beyond through starting new churches. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you for using your finances to change lives. Here's how the rest of this video is going to go. We're going to experience some music. In fact, let us know a lyric you found meaningful in the live chat or comments. We're going to experience communion. Each week we focus on the sacrificial love of Jesus through a simple meal. So, now's the time to gather some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and blood. After the song is done, I'm going to put up a timer on the screen. Feel free to eat and drink when you are ready. After communion is done, we'll listen to this week's message. Once that's done, let us know something meaningful you heard in the live chat or comments. Let's get going.
This is the word here in the flesh, living among the meek and lonely. The voice of God is every breath, salvation of the world unfolding. Behold him, behold him, lift up your eyes, see the Son of Heaven. Hosanna, Hosanna, pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus. This is his heart upon the cross, and from his wounds his mercies flowing. And now the dawn put death to death, and ever since that grave's been empty. Behold him, behold him, lift up your eyes, see the Son of Heaven. Hosanna, Hosanna, pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus. Behold him, behold him, lift up your eyes, see the Son of Heaven. Hosanna, Hosanna, pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus. This is his home, here in our chest. At every door our Savior's knocking. Oh, let him in, oh, let him out. With every yes, his kingdom's
Hey everyone, it's me, Mitch. I'm really glad you're tuning into this episode of Suncrest On Demand. Listen, coming up on Sunday, September 12th, we're having something at Suncrest's building called Game Day at Suncrest. We're hosting a watch party for the season opener for the Chicago Bears, and it's going to be a blast. And so I want you to know, I want you to be there. But in order for you to understand fully what's going to happen, I'm going to turn it over to me. Check this out.
I've got all sorts of people asking me lots of questions. Things like, Mitch, do I have to like football to watch this event? Let me tell you, no, you do not. But, oh God! But let me tell you, it's gonna make it easier if you at least are willing to be around people who do like watching football. You know, I've got people also asking me, Mitch, do I have to like watching football? You don't have to like watching football, but you should invite someone who definitely does like watching football. I've got people asking me, Mitch, what do I do with my kids if we come to Game Day at Suncrest? Let me tell you, we've got inflatables, we've got all sorts of activities for them. Your kids, they're going to love it. I've got other people asking me, man, if we come to Game Day at Suncrest, what do we do for dinner? Don't worry, we've got it covered. Welch's Meat Market's coming, Forefathers Brewing is coming. We've got something for everyone. September 12th, Game Day at Suncrest. I promise it's gonna be fun. I promise no one's gonna tackle you, but I need to be done with this video because I'm tired of being tackled myself, so we'll see you at Game Day at Suncrest. Oh, mine!
This has been an awesome series, hasn't it? We have a couple more weeks still of these stories that come right from the lips of Jesus, and it's been a lot of fun to look at them together. It's been a really good season for us. If you read my note this week, the crowds are kind of surging around here, and I just want you to know, I really appreciate all of you who are inviting your friends. I met 6 new families last week, and one of the coolest things to me is when people walk through our doors and the people aren't really church kind of people. That's what our church is all about, being a welcoming spot for them. And so when they come in and they can kind of understand in real life terms what Jesus was saying through these stories, it's one of my most satisfying experiences. So with that said, today I'm going to jump right into the story, which actually means I'm going to jump into the story that is before the story. And I don't know if you've ever been in this situation where you start to tell a story, but then you back up and you're like, actually, I have to tell you what happened before that for it even to make sense, because it makes a bigger impact. And that's what we're going to see with this story that Jesus told today. Now, to kind of give a fast forward version of the story before the story, I just want to start with this question. It's a question we probably all ask. What is the path to real life? And by real life, I think everyone kind of gets what I mean by that. Like a lot of people live a life that doesn't feel like real life. It feels like, man, I'm kind of mildly frustrated all the time. Maybe you're dealing with some mild anxiety all the time, maybe some mild depression all the time, and maybe you're saying, Greg, take the word mild out. That's just the way life is. It feels like a grind every single day. I think maybe the short phrase that most of us use to describe it is we think, man, there's got to be something more than this. And it actually causes people to kind of step back. If you think, man, joy has been elusive. Real peace in life, the truth is I don't have it. Those sorts of things cause us to step back and think there's got to be something more to life. And Jesus, of course, was the person who came along and in all kinds of different ways himself described this thing that was more than just the mildly frustrating life. Sometimes he would call it abundant life. Sometimes he would call it the life that is truly life. Sometimes he would call it new life. Sometimes he would describe it as being born again, like you can almost have a do-over, a start over, some different kind of life. And so as Jesus was starting to describe this, it was really resonating with people. Maybe it'll resonate with you today. And it gets him to a point where there are all kinds of people who are kind of elbowing in to listen to what Jesus has to say. So I'm going to start this right at the beginning of the chapter of Luke chapter 11. It says, meanwhile, when a crowd of many thousands had gathered. Now, we've been talking all through this series that whenever Jesus was teaching, there was always the crowd. These people were not necessarily followers of Jesus. They were interested. They were fascinated, but they weren't followers. They were curious, but they weren't Christians. And they were being drawn in. Maybe they would eventually become followers or disciples. And I know that's some of you in the room tonight. Like you'd say, no, I'm not a Christian. Or if you stop and think about it, you think, oh, I'm probably not a Christian, but I am curious. That's the crowds. And these crowds had not only become thousands, but they were trampling on one another. And then it says this, but Jesus began to speak first to his disciples. And just a little bit of a heads up, part of the theme for where Jesus is going with this has to do with money. And I always think it's fascinating when I watch how Jesus tries to teach about money. And I think this is part of what's happening, and maybe you can receive it this way too. When he was talking to his disciples, people who are followers of his, he wanted to just have a really straightforward conversation. And that's going to be part of what this conversation is today. And it's almost like for the crowds, he was okay with them overhearing the conversation he was having with his disciples. So if you're one of Jesus' disciples, that means you want to live the life that Jesus lived. You want your life to look like his. It's really the primary orientation of your life. You would say, Jesus is Lord. Whatever he says, I will do. And if that's you, Jesus is talking to you today first, and he's just letting the crowd kind of listen in on this. And it's interesting, the theme, because he actually doesn't start with the story. He's starting with, I'm just going to share with you kind of 3 quick sentences that he said. I'll let you kind of figure out if you can see the theme that runs through them, but each one of them has a punch on his own. So he's talking to these disciples, overheard by the crowd, and he says, there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What you've said in the dark will be heard in the daylight. And he's definitely describing here that all the things that are happening on earth, things that people think they're hiding, they think they're concealing them, people think they're the only one who knows. He says one day when the kingdom of heaven comes, it's all revealed. There are no secrets. And this is kind of my question for you. Is that good news for you? Is it good news? Because I don't know, maybe some people automatically perceive that it's bad news. It's like, actually, I have secrets. I don't want everyone to know. The reason they're secrets is I'm embarrassed about them. I don't want them to come to light. I've concealed them. And Jesus just seems to indicate that one day it's all going to come out. But I'm suggesting to you that this is actually very good news if you'll stop and think about it. If you can think about the world, first of all, it's good that Jesus gives us a heads up that this is coming. If you're a person who's been wronged by someone, and it seemed like they got away with it, this is part of Jesus' promise to you. They're not going to get away with it forever. It's coming out. There will be justice in the end. Take heart, actually. That thing someone did to you that it seems like they got away with. And for those of us who of course, need to listen to these words personally, like it is actually a good warning or maybe even an encouragement. Because if you know it's going to come out, it might reshape your life and how you live. And actually, this is part of what Jesus is saying. It's almost like a gift to you because then you'll be able to live the life that is truly life. You won't have to walk around hiding this, making sure someone doesn't know this. And maybe this is the biggest thing of all. When there's no more secrets, when nobody's concealing anything anymore, and that day is coming and you should know that it's coming, what you're going to find is that God loves you completely, even with all of that. And actually, one of the ways this human experience that we have on this earth messes us up a little bit is that when we walk through life and we want to experience an intimate, loving relationship with someone else, your son or your daughter, your parents, anyone, one of the things we do is when we close off part of our life to them and we say, well, I'm going to show this part of my life, but not that part, because I'd be embarrassed to show that part. They probably wouldn't love me if I showed that part. And so then you experience love, but you all know, we all know, I'm actually only able to be loved to the degree that I'm known. And we actually kind of walk around saying, yeah, they love me, but that's because they don't really know me. And one of the most powerful things about God is he knows everything about you and he loves you. It's a powerful statement from Jesus. Here's statement number 2. See if you see the theme. He says, do not be afraid of those that kill the body, and after that can do no more. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has the authority to throw you into hell. And Jesus, he's just having a real candid conversation with his disciples. And he's saying, you should just pay attention to this. And we know this. The most inspiring people who have ever lived, they lived for something larger than themselves, for something that would last beyond themselves. They lived knowing they might die. And it's not a death wish. It's not. But there is a sense in which I understand what's really important. I've done the calculation. I shouldn't have my fears in this life be about these earthly things, because afterlife is forever. And I ought to arrange what concerns me, what worries me, based on who God is, not on what people think. Could be free. Maybe you're seeing the theme. Here's the third thing that he says. He says, whoever publicly acknowledges me before others, the Son of Man will also acknowledge before the angels of God. But whoever disowns me before others will be disowned before the angels of God. Maybe you've heard this phrase before when someone's talking to you and they've been nice, but maybe they're leading a class and the class is getting a little out of hand, and someone will say, please do not mistake my kindness for weakness. And whenever I hear someone use that phrase, I always think Jesus was kind of the OG on that phrase. Because Jesus was truly compassionate. He was truly gracious. He was truly there to pick someone else when they had fallen down. He was truly kind. But Jesus was not a pushover. And no one should suspect that because he was gracious and compassionate and kind, that you could take advantage of him. Not at all. Jesus says, listen, you say you're mine to everybody else on planet Earth, and you'll be mine in heaven. You try to get in the move from this life to the next and say, Jesus, I'm yours, but on earth you weren't mine. Let's not pretend that how I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, of course you're mine. And Jesus is just having a really honest conversation. And again, man, at the very least, it's a good warning. And actually, I think it's a powerful and compelling vision to say, yeah, why am I so living this life on this earth so differently than if I do it in light of heaven? And actually, I think this is the theme. I'll just kind of give it away to you for the life that is truly life. Jesus' theme is, if you want to live a real life, infuse the afterlife into every part of this life. If you live this life with your head down, if you think your 60 years or your 80 years or your 20 years is all you're going to have, if you live in a material world, not a spiritual world, if you're concerned with temporary things, not eternal things, it's actually a recipe for mild frustration and mild depression and mild anxiety and think there's got to be something more, because there is something more. And Jesus is saying, look beyond that. Look up to heaven. Look beyond this life. And when you center yourself on that, it actually helps a lot with the meaning and purpose and peace of this life. That's the way to find this life that is truly life. Now, Jesus is teaching this, okay? He's teaching, this is the theme. And in a way, you could hardly believe he gets interrupted while he's teaching. This is what happens. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, I don't know how you think Jesus is going to react to this. Well, let's just watch. Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And my favorite word in this whole thing is, man. Jesus is like, come on, man. This isn't, were you even listening to what I was just saying? I'm just talking to you about how, the heavenly things, the eternal things, the not temporary things, that has to be the focus of our life. That's what you should really worry about. You think about that and it'll shape this life. And then, did you see the question you asked me? It's all about this little dispute that you have with your family member. And it's all about the inheritance that is like exhibit A for this world. Man, who appointed? Now, Now, maybe this guy had kind of been half listening, because Jesus does refer to himself as a judge multiple times. It's actually Jesus who will judge the world in the end. So it's not that Jesus had never called himself a judge. So maybe this guy thought, well, here's a judge. But Jesus is like, no, this isn't the kind of stuff I judge. Who appointed me? This isn't my job. I have bigger fish to fry. The message is bigger than that. You might even say, Jesus says, I don't have time for this. There's more important things. And then he said to them, to the crowd, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Because life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. And I want to ask you, whether you're a disciple or whether you're part of the crowd tonight, to consider this statement. Watch out. Everything in this world will draw you toward all kinds of greed. But if you live this life, like the goal of life is an abundance of possessions, it will mess you up. It'll leave you mildly frustrated and depressed with some anxiety. You'll think there's got to be more than this, because there is more than this. And Jesus says, okay, you raised the question. Let's have a little story time about those possessions. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. And he thought to himself. Now, I made this one yellow here because you're going to see this theme throughout the story. The guy who had a great crop, the way he's trying to decide what he's going to do with the crop is not that he looked up and asked God. And it's not even that he went and got some good counsel from other people. He's going to have an internal conversation with himself. And I actually think people do this all the time. Listen, if you're thinking about a decision you have to make and you're afraid that someone might give you a different answer than you want, the safest route is just to have a conversation with yourself. So he thought to himself, he counseled himself. He considered himself smart enough and said, I made a lot of money, got a lot of crops. I must be smart enough to make these kind of decisions. What should I do? I have no place to store my crops. He sees that as a problem. Maybe it's not a problem. I don't know. Then he said, this is what I'll do. He's talking to himself now. He thought to himself, now he's talking to himself. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. Now this idea of surplus is going to be important a little later on as we go, but just think about this. He has extra, he has surplus. And the question kind of is, what are you doing with the surplus? And I'll say to myself, I'm still in this conversation, just with me, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Now, it's worth just pausing for a second to say, if you ended up with a surplus, how would you react to that? And if you just had the conversation with yourself, what would you do with that? Maybe you'd make the same decision that he did. Hey, it seems like a wise thing if I store it up for the future, then in this life, this earthly material life, I should be fine. I can eat, I can drink, I can be merry. I mean, is there anything more to life than that? Than that? But God said to him, this is Jesus teaching, God said to him, you fool, this very night, your life's going to be demanded from you. Then who's going to get what you prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. This is how it will be for anyone who's completely focused on this world, thinks that the way to have a real life is to get every experience and everything and every toy you can out of this world. This is how it'll be for people who keep their eyes down and don't think about the eternal and heavenly things of this world. This is how it will be for those who store up things for themselves, but are not rich toward God. So, I want to give you 3 realities to think about, and then 3 ways you might step in to how life could be different for you. Let's start with this. Realities worth thinking about. It's worth thinking that death could come to you at any time. Many of you know our 21-year-old son is in the Marines. Just a few months ago, he was deployed in the Middle East. He's now safely in California. But when I heard the news that 12 Marines were killed in Afghanistan, it first, of course, made me think, what if that had been 6 months ago? And then it made me think, those are his brothers. They're 21 years old. They're 23 years old. And of course, it wasn't just the Marines. It was Afghans who were trying to get out of their country. But you don't know when you're going to die. And reminding ourselves that we don't know when we're going to die is actually a really, really healthy way. It shouldn't be a scary way. It should be a healthy way to remember how we live. I've been a pastor for too long, maybe, because I've done too many funerals for kids and too many funerals for teenagers, like the one that died in Highland last week. And too many funerals for people in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. And it just makes me hyper aware that death could come at any time. Now remember, death is far from the worst thing that can happen. It was Jesus who said, don't be afraid of the one who can kill your body. There's a whole afterlife after this. And actually, this is what I always say at funerals. There is something about death that causes us to think with tremendous clarity about someone's life. Usually it's actually in the moment of death that we all step back and we think about that person, what they valued, who they are, amazed by their generosity, moved by their love. And one of the things Jesus, I think, is teaching us through all of this is if you live with the reality of death in mind, not in a scary, go cower in the corner sort of way, but understanding that could come at any time, it will shape how you live. And you'll start to do the calculation that whether you have 20 years on this earth or 40 years or 100 years, all of it is a mist compared to forever and ever with God. And the only way to live a life that is truly life is to not get stuck just thinking about this one, but think about that one. It's worth thinking about the idea that surpluses are powerful gauges in our lives. I think it's so fascinating that in the way Jesus crafts this story, the rich man had a surplus. Because whether people are rich or poor or whatever, and when you have kind of your everyday life sort of stuff, I think it's worth trying to have the conversation, but almost always when I try to have the conversation about being generous toward God, the point of this whole passage, when people are just living their everyday life, there's this almost mind block, roadblock to think, oh, I can't, it's all spoken for already. And I do want to help people get over that, but surplus is actually a beautiful gauge to take the pressure off the everyday and say, well, what do you do when there's a surplus? That's a really great gauge for how you think about stuff. One of the questions I always ask couples I'm preparing to do their wedding, I always say, hey, if you unexpectedly get $200, what do you do with it? Do you give it? Do you save it? Or do you spend it? And I love watching brides-to-be fight with husbands-to-be about that question. Because it's a values question, right? And you start to envision, well, if we had a surplus, this isn't money we had to have to pay the bills this month. It's a little extra. What would we do? And I got to tell you, the answer to that question may be one of the most revealing things about you. And actually, I don't know. There's a fair amount of occasions in our lives when there's a surplus. I mean, everyone thinks, oh yeah, it'd be nice if there were a surplus. Yeah, where is that surplus, Greg? Well, I don't know. Do you ever get a bonus? I don't know. Are your retirement investments doing better than you expected? I don't know. Did your house increase in value and in kind of a way that's not ordinary over the last year? And all of a sudden you have more than you thought you had. It almost came out of nowhere. It's a surplus. And the way you think about what you're going to do with that, it says so many things about you, good or bad, godly or ungodly. It's almost the perfect gauge. I encourage people to be rich toward God, as Jesus did. I encourage people to put that in their everyday rhythm of life. And while I want people to take steps that are sacrificial, even when it's uncomfortable, when I can't get someone to do that, I'll always say to them, well, then just do this. Next time you get a raise, just give all of that raise. And then the next time after that, when you get your next surplus, the next thing, then go with that. And instead of going out to, and I have so much respect for people who take that path. And I'm so fascinated by people who, even when there's a surplus, spend on me and myself. The thing we're thinking about is that greed is foolish. It's interesting. God doesn't say greed is wrong here, although it is. He doesn't say that greed is evil, though you could make that case. He says, you fool. Of course, the contrast to this, if you're an old movie buff, is Gordon Gekko, right? Greed is good. Actually, if you watch the clip, he says, greed is good. Greed is right. Greed is helpful. But God says greed is just a gross miscalculation. You have to ask yourself, what is greed? This is not a difficult definition. Greed is when you take everything you have, or almost everything you have, and you use it on yourself and your family. I think it's the easiest definition of greed. It doesn't count as not greedy when you buy your kids stuff. That doesn't count. Like me and my family, greed. Rich toward God, not greed. And I think it's fascinating how Jesus kind of casts this as a calculation. He says, there's this life, and to invest in this life, to say, I'm going to use that so I can eat, drink, and be merry, and do nothing that changes the brokenness of this world, do nothing that attracts people to the love and the grace of God, to do nothing to help more people find eternity with God, to do nothing with that, but just to use all your stuff on me and myself. It's just a dumb decision. It's just what a fool would do. That's like someone who doesn't understand how your decisions yesterday affect today and how your decisions today affect tomorrow, or how your decisions in this life affects the next life, or how, wise people see how that fits together. Greed is just foolish. So, with that in mind, with Jesus' story in mind, I want to offer you 3 potential steps for you to take out of this message. When you hear, especially if you're a disciple, but maybe even if you're one of the crowd, you think these would be ways to experience change. So this is how change happens here. And maybe this will be unexpected to you, but let me try these 3 things out on you. The first one, do your estate plan. Is that what you were expecting? I got to tell you, I come at this a little bit pastorally because I do encounter families who have all the stress of a loved one dying, all the chaos of that, and then on top of that, the unnecessary chaos, the pain of figuring stuff out that could have been figured out before they died, that could have been clarified. It leads to fights, it leads to disputes among kids, it leads to all kinds of stuff. And one of the questions that Jesus asks in this is, who will get what you stored up for yourself? Who will get it? And so I really want to encourage you to do this. It is an absolute gift to your family, and it allows you to think right now. I mean, is there any other definition of a surplus than the stuff that's left over when you die? To think about how you want to handle that. Now, a little extra here. If you have an attorney, I think go to this with your attorney. If you're sitting there like, Greg, I don't even know where I'd start. We worked quite a bit over the summer to set something up to say, hey, how could we actually help people with this? And two things. You can either just email estate@suncrest.org, take a picture of that so you remember the email address later. Or when you go out in the Commons today, we actually have an attorney who's here. We have an attorney on our business consulting team here at Suncrest, and that attorney recommended a local attorney who does this kind of stuff. And Suncrest is even willing to go in with you if you would say, yeah, in my estate, I'd like to bless the kingdom of God through Suncrest as well. But this could be one of the most life-changing things that you do. That coming out of here, this isn't just about your money. It is about your kids. If you're in your 30s and you have little kids and you think, I don't even have anything, they can fight over nothing. You have kids. And to clarify what would happen to your kids, who will get what you have? Number two, I want you to be rich toward God. I do not want you to be greedy. And around Suncrest, we almost all the time, we talk about this in terms of the 4 R's. I usually see people make this progression when they give. They're a rookie giver. That's like the first time you give to the kingdom of God. They move from being rookie givers, like I did it once, to a recurring giver in any amount that seems comfortable for them, something they feel like they can pull off and be like, but I'm going to do this weekly, monthly, whatever. People move from that to be a relational giver. And the way we talk about relational giving is, one of the benchmarks all throughout the scriptures is that you would give 10%. Like it's a really healthy benchmark of your income to the work of God. And so sometimes people grow into that to be a relational giver. And then there's people who are radical givers who give far beyond 10%. I just want to ask you Jesus' question. Are you rich toward God? You don't have to sign up for anything. You can go into our app. We tell you to use this app all the time. This is just actually a quick picture of the app. I put $500 on there. I actually started with $700,000, just so you know. Took it down to 500. I don't know. I'm not telling you this is the right amount. Actually, the important part about this is some of you are rookie givers, and it'll be a one-time gift. You're going to just try it. You're going to be honest and say, yeah, here's the truth. I'm greedy. I spend all of my money on me and my family. And I'm going to take one step. And if you've been a one-time giver before, then the idea that I'm going to become a recurring giver, weekly, monthly, I'm going to take those steps. Man, do not let this slip away without making sure that you know life does not consist in the abundance of your possessions. That if you look toward heaven, and you think, where's real life? Generosity is a part of that real life. Now, here's what I know. There's some of you who are sitting here like, Greg, I'm not against giving. I'm not against estate planning. I'm not against any of it. I think it's a good idea, but you have no idea how far away I am from even being able to try that stuff. My financial world, it's upside down. It's messed up. I don't know if I make more than I spend or if I don't. I'm trying to figure some things out. And if the honest truth is your world is a little bit messed up financially and you just need to get on your feet and kind of organize some things, then we want to help with that too. We have a workshop, it's a financial workshop, and I love this title. It's called Somehow I Manage. So if you've ever thought this about your money, like, somehow I manage, I'd actually like to learn how I manage, or I'd like to learn how to manage what I have. I actually want to aim at some things, but I've never been really able to do that because of kind of the situation my finances are in. Listen, you might think you're the only one here. I promise you, you're not. You're in good company. And when people come to these kind of seminars for us, there's actually kind of a camaraderie there to say, yep, we're humble about this. We need to kind of figure it out. So in the app, you'll see this image, Somehow I Manage. You can register. There's all kinds of info in there. Just hop into the app. It's coming up in next month. But let me finish with the sentence Jesus speaks after he tells this story. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, Do not worry about your life. You want the secret to real life? Don't worry about this life. Worry about the next one. Don't worry about your life. Worry about other people's lives. You want to find purpose. You want to step out of that anxiety and that depression. Get out there and live life in light of the kingdom of God, the afterlife, and the difference you can make in this world. Don't live it worrying about this life.
Before you turn off this video, hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons. We'll see you next week, same time, same channel, and until then, go and be the church. All right.